Hi, we are talking about a leap in the development of the concept of coming soon listings. That leap is the clear cooperation policy from the National Association of Realtors. But before we talk about this clear cooperation policy, we need to be on the same conceptual page. Now, the coming soon phenomenon is not a new phenomenon. The concept is that properties can sell without exposing the property to the whole world, to the whole market, through the MLS and other public databases. The concern about the coming soon phenomenon is that it is being driven less by what is in the seller's best interests and more by the listing broker's best interest. The fear is that in the vast majority of situations, listing brokers are doing this as a way of avoiding the need to pay another broker a co-op commission. Now, let's be clear, not all coming soon listings are at the expense of sellers. Some sellers are making informed decisions to list their property and not expose it to the whole market, or are choosing to expose it to the whole market in a true coming soon way. What are examples of what I'm talking about? One example is the listing broker may be passing all of the savings of avoiding the need to pay a co-op commission. The listing broker may be passing all of that savings on to the seller, in which case the seller has a legitimate financial interest, a substantial financial interest, in having the listing broker sell that property on the listing broker's own without the need to pay a co-op commission. Another way that the seller might make an informed decision to sell the property through quiet marketing is the seller has privacy concerns. The seller doesn't want the neighbors to know that they're selling. The seller doesn't want the neighbors to know that they're getting divorced, or that one of the sellers has a need to sell the property for health issues. Health issues create other privacy concerns. The unhealthy person may be laid up in the property itself, not want the stress of having people traipse through for showings and the like. So there are legitimate reasons why sellers choose not to expose the property to the whole market. However, again, perhaps being mildly repetitive, the concern is that sellers are not making an informed decision to perhaps avoid selling the property to the highest and best buyer, and that sellers are being talked into the quiet marketing of a property because the listing broker is trying to keep more of the commission. Weighing in to that tension comes the National Association of Realtors, who has passed this clear cooperation policy. I am not going to read the whole policy to you, just the first sentence, just the meat of it. Within one, not two, not three, but within one business day of marketing the property to the public, the listing broker must submit the listing to the MLS for cooperation with other MLS participants. What this takes away is the ability of a seller to make an informed decision to waive the inclusion of the property in the MLS. And the concept is if the seller is going to reap the benefits of listing the property with a broker, who in turn reaps the benefit of the MLS, then that broker who benefits from the MLS, benefits from the awesome power of the MLS in some cases, needs to submit all that broker's listings once the property is publicly marketed into the MLS. The analogy that's used is, hey, if listing broker, if you are going to show up at this co-op sort of thing, the potluck dinner is the analogy, and I think the best analogy is a co-op dinner that's going on day after day after day. You have to contribute to it, and you have to contribute all your listings to it, at least your listings that are publicly marketed. You don't get to show up with just a fork, and the owners that use you, the sellers that use you aren't going to be able to override that. Now, there is still a little room for play about how this gets implemented. One of the things that will get sorted out over time a little bit is, the definition of public marketing, I have not read that to you. There could be a little bit of room for debate about what that means at the margins. Another thing is the requirement that the property go into the MLS doesn't necessarily mean it has to go into the MLS on an active kind of status. One of the things that MLSs may do is create limbo, inactive kind of statuses that the property goes in at, where perhaps the property is not available for showings, for example. We'll see how that shakes out. I anticipate that there might be some intense lobbying from the various stakeholders, a little big brokerage firm perhaps versus a little brokerage firm lobbying in MLSs, realtor-controlled MLSs. Perhaps some lobbying between brokerage firms that tend to have a model where they work more with sellers than with buyers. A little lobbying on those fronts. We'll have to see how this all shakes out. But in the short run, it's pretty clear there's a direction that if we're talking about a realtor MLS, that owners, sellers will not be able to exempt themselves out of the need to put the property in the MLS once that seller decides to cross over the threshold and publicly market the property. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening this far. Remember, we live in a complex world. Be careful out there.